Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Babergh District Council's Planning Committee. I will now ask the Government Officer to read out the domestic arrangements and the fire regulations. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Chair. Please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use. Please do not interrupt other speakers or hold separate conversations whilst others are speaking. If you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please ensure your mobile phones are on silent or switched off and that your laptop is also switched to silent. We'll be using the e-voting for this meeting on the Modern Gov app, so please could members make sure they are logged in and ready to use the app. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be recorded, except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you'll be deemed by the Council to have consented to being recorded. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you are also consenting to be recorded by the Council and to the possible use of those sound recordings for webcasting and training purposes. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. If you hear the fire alarm, leave the building immediately via fire exit and make your way to the assembly ground, which is Ipswich Town Football Ground. Follow the signs directing you to the fire exits at each end of the floor. Do not enter the atrium. If you're in the atrium at the time of the alarm, follow the signs to the nearest fire exit. Use the stairs, not the lifts, and do not re-enter the building until told it is safe to do so. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Claire. Introductions. Today we have the Area Planning Manager, Mark Russell, with us.
Good morning.
Our Legal Advisor today is
Christine Flitner.
Christine. Case Officer President at the moment is Samantha Summers. And the Government Officer you've already met is Claire Philpott. Can I move to the agenda? Right. Do you have any apologies for absence?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. To receive declarations of pecuniary interests and other registrable and non-registrable interests by members. Are there any to declare? No? Thank you. Moving on. Confirmation of the minutes of the meeting held on the 19th of October. Are there any points regarding the accuracy of the minutes? No? In that case, could I have a proposer to accept the minutes? Councillor Osborne, Councillor Hinton, the seconder. Should we just do a show of hands?
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress, members. Councillor Beer, can I take your... Thank you. And Councillor McCraw? Thank you. Thank you, members. Chair, that's 8 votes for and 1 abstention. That's carried.
Thank you. Moving on. Notification of petitions.
None received, Chair.
Site inspections.
None, Chair.
Thank you. We'll move into the schedule of planning applications. The first one we have to consider is DC 22-023336, Chiltern Woods, mixed development to north of Woodall Business Park. I will invite Case Officer Sam to give us an introduction. Sam, over to you. Thank you.
Good morning. This application seeks reserve matters for layout, appearance, scale and landscaping for Phase 2 of the Chiltern Woods development. This application comes to committee because it is a major development of 242 houses. Outline permission was granted for Chiltern Woods in 2018 for the erection of up to 1,150 dwellings, 15 hectares of employment development, which included a household waste site, recycling centre, district heating, energy centre, a village centre, retail space, village hall, workspace, primary school, preschool and car parking. Also included is the vehicular access points, sustainable transport links, community woodland, open space, sustainable drainage, sports pavilion, playing fields, allotments and associated ancillary works. The Chiltern Wood site is to the north of Sudbury. This plan shows the extent of the residential development site of 1,150 dwellings, which Taylor Wimpey has ownership of. Major infrastructure works have been granted permission for the distributor road and drainage. The Phase 1 residential development of the scheme has been granted permission for 200 dwellings. The primary school site, which is located just here, is under a different ownership and will come forward at a different phase of development. The red line shows the site that we're looking at today, which is for 242 dwellings. This plan shows the application site of Phase 2 in relation to the existing development of Albury Drive, which is down here, Hawkins Road, Acton Lane, and Mountbatten Road, which is up here. Also, Woodhall Business Park lays in this area here. This plan also shows the Phase 1 development, which was both sides of Acton Lane, so a smaller site just here and then the larger site just here. And this is the primary school site that will come forward later. There is little in the way of constraints for the Phase 2 development site, apart from a public right-of-way which runs along the western boundary of the site, which you can just see here. This plan shows the contour lines of the site, the public right-of-way, which is this dark line that runs down here, the primary school site just here, Phase 1 development that's being constructed at the moment just here, and Acton Lane, which cuts through Chiltern Woods development here. This area is to be pedestrianised. Members might remember that from the Phase 1 application. The old middle school site that's actually been demolished now, that was accessed off Acton Lane, is this here, just to give you a bit of context of where the site is. This is the proposed L-shaped layout of the site. There are green areas all around the edges of the site to the western boundary, southern, and then part of this eastern boundary here. Those green areas include the drainage basins and swales for the surface water drainage of the site. An area of open space is to the northeastern corner of the site, just here. This here is the distributor road, which already has planning permission. 2 junctions are proposed from this distributor road for Phase 2, one just here and the other one here. Further green areas within the site are a doorstep green area in the centre of this residential area just here, and also the cycle link that runs through here, which links the other phases of development to the primary school site. The existing public right-of-way along the western boundary is included within this green area here. This plan shows the layout of the roads on the site. The dark grey areas are the roads to be adopted, and then the brown areas are the private drives. There are two distinct areas within the site itself, each served from one of those two access points. So there's no crossing over between the two, and this eases getting around the site and makes it much easier for visitors and delivery drivers, etc., to find their way around. This blue line here shows the cycleway. There are several types of parking on the site. The yellow shows the courtyard parking, which serves the apartment blocks and some of the houses that are forward-facing frontages onto the public open space areas. This creates a pleasant area that's not cluttered with vehicles, and also enables lots of lovely natural surveillance of those public areas without any interference from vehicles. The pink areas show the on-plot parking, and the orange ones are the garages. Blue is allocated frontage parking, and the pale green is non-allocated courtyard parking. Pale blue are disabled parking spaces which relate to the apartment blocks. There's 3 disabled flats that are proposed for this development, and each with 1 parking space. The visitor parking is shown in green, and the red shows extra parking for the 4 and 5 bedroom dwellings, where there is a bit of an issue with triple tandem parking. So what's happened is there's garages with 2 parking spaces in front, but because that's quite difficult for people to manoeuvre in and out, if there's several people wanting to go out at the same time or different times and they're not parked in the correct order, on-street parking is provided. Suffolk County Council highways, they do not like triple tandem parking. However, because there's very few of these and on-street parking has been provided, they have lifted their objection to the triple tandem parking. All of the dwellings will have electric vehicle charging points. There are 2 important documents for Chiltern Woods, specific to Chiltern Woods, along with the MPPF and our own policies. One of these is the height parameter plan, which shows which areas should be a maximum height levels. With this site, there's actually 2. So this beige area covers most of the site, and that relates to a 10.8 metre height restriction. This beigey coloured area just here is allowed to go up to 12 metres. So the northern part of the phase 2 development just falls within this area here. So the buildings are slightly higher than the rest of the development, which falls within this other area, the lower level of 10.8 metres. So this is the massing plan showing you the heights of the buildings on site. So the dark red ones just here, those 2 buildings, they are apartment blocks which are 3 stories high. The dark orange ones, which there is another slightly reduced height apartment block just here, they're 2.5 stories high. And then the majority of the buildings on the site, shown in yellow, are 2-storey dwellings. All of the buildings fit within those height parameter restrictions that were agreed as part of the discharge of conditions of the outline permission. The unit mix on the site is considered to be good. There's 36 1- and 2-bedroom apartments, 6 1-bedroom coach houses, which will be for private use, not affordable, 66 2-bed units, 103 beds, 34 beds, and only 5 only 4 5-bed dwellings on this particular phase. A total of 72 affordable units are to be provided on the site. These are pepper potted around the site. Yellow shows the market housing, purple are the affordable rent, and the blue is the shared ownership homes. There's 36 1 and 2 bedroom apartments that are for affordable rent. 18 of the houses are affordable rent, and 18 of the shared ownership are 18 are shared ownership properties. 3 of the apartments are wheelchair friendly units. The Outline Planning Permission secured 25% affordable housing over the entire site. Phase 1 actually secured quite a high percentage at 42.5% affordable units on the 200 homes that were provided. This one, phase 2, comes out at 30%. So the 2 sites together so far are providing 35.5% affordable housing, which is 10.5% more than is actually agreed by the Section 106. The other important document specific to Chiltern Woods is the design code that was required by condition on the outline permission. Some members may remember that document coming forward to committee at the time of the phase 1 development. Members resolved to accept the 140-page document that had been out to public consultation, and the condition was discharged, which means that all further phases have to refer to this document when it's being designed, both by the developer but also by us, the planning committee. The document is to be used for all future residential development on the site to ensure that the development is sensitively designed to its surroundings. The site has been broken up into character areas. Phase 2 has 4 different character types within the site. To the north, marked with the orange colour, is the village green area. In the centre of the site, sort of marked with that beigey colour, that's the residential neighbourhood character area. Around the boundaries, you can see the green, and that is Parkside and linear green linkages. And to the south-east corner, just here, it's a very small area shown in pink. That's actually the Acton Lane character area. The design code describes what each character area should include, such as the types of dwellings, materials, planting, boundary treatments, and surfacing materials. The presentation will now go through the character areas with extracts from the design code and also some street scenes to show the build types, materials, and spacing of the dwellings proposed. I haven't actually included any specific house types. We would have gone well over 100 slides for you to view today if I had included all of those. So I thought the street scenes would be a more helpful way of showing you and giving you a flavour of the different house types that have been proposed. This is the village green area, so that section right in the north of the site. The materials for that area are to be the darker tones, so red brick, some weatherboarding, those type of materials that you can see on that slide. This is the area that has the maximum height of 12 metres for dwellings. This allows for the taller apartment blocks at the 3-storey level. Landscape detailing includes quite formal materials that are attractive in that green area, facing onto that public open space. This is a sample of the type of planting that would be suitable in the area, so quite formal, lovely, big natural trees. Moving on to some of the street scene. This here actually shows that frontage that faces onto this public open space just here. So You've got that 3-storey apartment block just here and some 2.5-storey semi-detached dwellings. This is the residential neighbourhood area. This is a much higher density build area. The materials are lighter in tone, with the use of render and some buff brick, as well as maybe some of the reds mixed in there as well. Houses in this character area range from 2 to 2.5 stories in height. Also included in this area are the coach houses that are above garages, so apartments above garages, and also these drive-throughs to the parking courtyards to the rear of some of the properties. The planting in residential neighbourhoods will be more ornamental and colourful to lift the area visually. The use of close-bordered fencing is necessary to protect the privacy in the higher density areas of the site. Metal railings are an attractive feature that help to maintain an open feeling to the frontages. This street scene shows the dwellings along the eastern boundary with the primary school site and phase 1. You can see the third, slightly lesser in height apartment block just here. And you can see this use of render to help lighten the area. This is the street scene that faces onto the cycleway link between the village green area and the residential neighbourhood area. There's a variety in the house types and the materials, and also the colour of the render. This helps to give variety in a high density build area. This is another residential street showing the variety of the house types. This is the street scene from one of the 2 access points. So as you come into the development itself, also showing more variety in the house types and materials. Moving on to the Acton Lane character area, this is the smallest area on the site. Houses in this area tend to be the larger 4 and 5 bedroomed units. The lighter coloured materials are used in this area. Again, attractive ornamental shrubs and trees are used in this area. The homes in this area face onto Acton Lane with a wide area of green between phase 2 and Acton Lane itself. Rustic post and rail fencing is used to keep this area open and welcoming. This is the street scene looking onto the green area, which includes a swale for drainage. Natural surveillance of this area is quite important because of the water risk. The final character area is the parkside and linear green linkages. As there is more space in this area, the dwellings are finished in the darker tones again. Dwellings in this character area face towards the public open space to give natural surveillance to areas of child play and also the drainage. This also gives an attractive viewpoint when looking from the public spaces back towards the development itself. More natural tree planting is used in this area, along with some ornamental hedging. Knee rails are to be used to separate spaces in this area. This shows the street scene in the southwestern corner of the site, overlooking the green space. A couple of CGIs have been produced to show what the development is likely to look like when it's built out. The first one is the parkside and linear green linkages in the south of the site. And this second one is those tall apartment blocks in the north of the site in the village green area, which overlook that green space. These are sample materials taken from the design code and show the lighter tones and darker tones. Specific brick and roof tiles are not mentioned in the design code, but the samples give a good indication of what should be used and where. Generally speaking, the darker tones are used in the less dense areas of the site where there is more light and space. Lighter tones are used in the more dense area so that the buildings do not become overbearing to the residents. Moving on to the landscaping, which is the final of the reserve matters today. 50% of the total area of Chiltern Woods is to be public open space. As well as the community woodland and sports field, each phase of development that comes forward will also have its own public open space. Phase 2 has 4 separate areas. The first is up in the north, just here. The second is this green cycleway that links through to phase 1 and the primary school site, and then will also link to the other phases of development. The third is a small doorstep green area in the centre of the residential area here. And the fourth is this very wide swathe of green area around the edges of the site. This includes the public right-of-way from Mountbatten Road along that western boundary and follows up. The area includes several drainage areas, swales and attenuation basins all around this green area here. There's also to be some street trees provided within the built-up areas to help soften the hard landscaping and to encourage wildlife into the centre. This is the northern section of the site, showing the tree planting to this public green area just here. The cycleway is shown linking through here. The public right-of-way runs along this western boundary and becomes part of the cycleway just up here. A children's play area is located in this area here, which will sit between phase 2 and phase 3. The play area includes seesaw, slide, balance beam, stepping stones, climbing frame, a rope walk, and natural mounds and stones. Moving south along the western boundary, the drainage features and the tree planting and also the footpath linking for pedestrians is all shown on this plan. The central doorstep green area, just in the middle here, also shows its planting. This is the southern part of the site. The deeper drainage basins will have rustic knee rails around them to stop the small children from accidentally falling into them if there happens to be a flood event. The swales are left open as these are quite shallow dips and can be used as play areas for children. The green areas are protected by bollards or fencing to ensure that vehicles do not drive onto them. There is an existing play area for the residents of Mountbatten Road, just in this area here. And there is a path that runs through this section which links the two developments together, which encourages interaction between new and existing residents. This is the eastern boundary with Acton Lane. Acton Lane is just here. In this area, there's a footpath that runs along here and then out onto the main distributor road rather than onto Acton Lane itself. This slide shows some of the examples of drainage and swales on other sites, just to give you an idea of what they might be planted with and what they might be looking like. So as you can see, they are quite shallow. They're generally dry unless there's a flood event, and normally planted with wildflowers to make an attractive feature for ecology. In terms of ecology, hedgehog fencing will be provided across the site, swift boxes built into the dwellings themselves, and much of the planting will be wildflowers in the public open space areas, particularly in the drainage areas. Also included for ecology are back boxes, bee bricks. I'll go back so you can see a pretty picture. Members today are deciding the reserve matters for phase 2. So that's layout, appearance, scale and landscaping. The recommendation of officers is to approve with a condition to agree the minor outstanding landscaping concerns that are in your papers. Also, the developer has asked that materials be conditioned. At the moment, Taylor Wimpey are finding it quite difficult to get hold of materials. So if we use a specific brick or roof tile, they have to come back in all the time to actually get it changed. So they would find it helpful if we could have a condition just to say that we can agree materials in writing. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Samantha. Any questions for the officer? Councillor Beer.
Well, three. Let me see if I can see all this. You referred to one-bed coach dwellings. I don't know what that is. Perhaps, is that like a bed set?
Yeah, so in this case, it's where you have garages and then a flat above the garage. And there's 6 of those actually on the site.
And they're just single?
Yeah, one-bedroom units. Yeah,
Thank you.
and they're all for private market housing.
Sounds a good idea. Triple Parkham, how many of those have we got? Because whilst counties say they're going to bend the rules on this, they're really still not acceptable.
Yeah, there's very few. I think it's 6, but the developer might be able to answer that question.
Okay, so
because I don't have the planning.
Very few, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, very few out of 242 dwellings.
Thank you. Now, I notice quite a lot of comments was made to posts and barriers to stop people parking where they shouldn't be on the verges and edges. Can you assure me that most of the housing properties, their boundary does go up to a solid either footpath in front or road in front? There's no grass verges in front of those properties where people can end up parking and making a mess of?
Yeah, so apart from the houses that face onto those green areas, which do have the knee-high railings around them, I believe that in the residential areas, nearly all of it will be pavement and then road.
Thank you. And a couple more. Who will look after those barriers and posts in 10 years' time? Because I know from other estates we've been on, they get knocked down, they rot, all sorts of things happen, and nobody wants to pick up the bill. So who is going to be responsible eventually down the road?
It will depend who takes on the maintenance. So either it could be parish council, or it could be district council, or indeed it could be a private management company. It depends how the developer works that out.
So just to be clear then, there will be some authority who will be responsible to do the replacements in the future.
Yes, that's correct.
Because quite often when we've gone back 10 years later, but it is on old sites, they've either disappeared and we can't get anyone to do any of the work and it becomes a mess. So that's good. My final point, then is, sorry, I've got two. Round by the school, could we have plan number 12 or 14 up? I'm just concerned, does the properties or this particular site border up to the school, or is there a road between there? Because, as you know, usually we create these schools on these estates, and in the past they get a chopper block with traffic and people taking their children to school in cars and what have you. Now, it looked rather tight on the plans, as though there was no spaces there. And I wanted to know whether, you know, we could end up taking our children to school behind the school, parking somewhere there, and going through the hedge or a footpath. Yeah, go to 12. I think that might show it better. Please, thank you. There, the school is in the second bit, isn't it? There.
Yeah, just there.
Now, across the road, there, you've got barriers on that. I saw that.
Yeah, this is the main distributor road.
Yeah.
So,
now, can they all park on there? Because you know as well as I do, Mr. Chairman, that where there's a school, if there's a road that they can park on, that will get chopper block between 10 to 9, 10 past 9 in the morning. So, is there any provisions there for this? Is that going to be the main entrance to the school, or will it be on the other side? We don't know that yet.
Don't know that yet, no, sorry. So the major infrastructure works came forward right at the start, before the phase 1 development came through. I'm not sure what was actually agreed for that, but because it's the main distributor road, I would assume that it would have some sort of parking restriction on there, double yellow lines, or something, but I'm not too sure of the detail.
Well, that can take 2 years to get, but so I can see we could have problems there. I think it's something we need to watch.
Yeah, so the developer might be able to answer that question for you. I wasn't involved with that particular application, so I don't know the detail of it, I'm afraid.
Well, I'll ask him that. And
Okay.
finally, have we heard any comments from the local ward members, Councillor Creswell and Councillor Jan Osborne?
I can answer that. We have a statement from Councillor Jan Osborne to read out.
Thank you.
Councillor Jameson.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few questions. Hiya. Am I correct that the three-storey apartment blocks are on the northernmost part, which is the highest part in the... So are they going to be prominent if they're at the highest part?
They will be prominent. So what you haven't seen on those plans is, as part of the outline, there has to be a provision for a new village centre, which will include a village hall and shops and also some residential. So what's happened is those big flats that you've seen, the three-storey, they create a bit of a focal point to help wayfind from the village centre into the different bits of the development. So they will be prominent, but it will have a green space between the village centre itself and the development. So it's just a way of helping people to find their way around using those landmark buildings.
Right. Okay. And with the apartment blocks, so that all the apartments in there affordable, or are there some market ones?
No, they are all affordable, all of the apartments. So it's a mix of 1 and 2 bedroom units in the apartments.
Right, okay. And one other thing, the cycleway, and are there any other cycle paths within the development, and are they dedicated or are they shared with pedestrians, which is going to cause, again,
so that's something that came up with phase 1, I think, that shared sort of surface between pedestrians and cycleways. That is carrying on through the site where I showed it to be. There's no other cycleways actually around the green space. That's footpaths instead of cycleways.
But on the actual roads and that, there's no cycle path?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay then, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Councillor Jameson. Councillor Busby.
Try a different one. I'll shout over there. Can you go to slide 12, I think? Sorry, 9, I think it was. Yeah, that's the one. The brown roads, the ones that aren't being adopted, who will be responsible for the maintenance of those?
I would imagine that it would be the management company or the residents that actually access from those private drives.
Yeah, if it's the residents, that's not satisfactory really, is it? It's only going to take one resident to decide not to contribute. What do they do about it? I mean, the roads will be could be in a dreadful state, especially if they're not tarmac. They're going to be some kind of permeable surface, I suppose. I think we need to batten down a decent maintenance plan on those.
Sam, any comments on that last question?
I don't have any comments, no.
Councillor Hinton.
I think Councillor McLaren wants to speak as well, so I don't know whether you missed her little flutter of a hand earlier on. Right, thank you. Just a quick one, Sam. In the report, it talks about surface water drainage being managed by SUDS, and Anglian Water saying that they will, if they're going to manage the SUDS, then they need to be involved in the design, etc. I thought that Suffolk County Council were the principal authority on terms of SUDS, because when I sat on the Joint Emergency Planning Committee here in this very chamber, when SUDS was first introduced, there was a bit of a battle as to who would be responsible for SUDS, whether it would be district councils as the planning authorities or county council. And county council won in the end, partly because they thought they could get some revenue from it, but that's another story. But they are the principal authority as far as SUDS are concerned, so why on earth are Anglian Water involved? Haven't they got enough problems polluting our waterways at the moment?
Yeah, it's quite an interesting thing that's only just started to come to light, actually, that they are happy, Anglian Water that is, are happy to adopt some of the SUDS. I think partly as a control of what goes through their system, so they don't want to see flooding. It's something that's being worked on at the moment. They will only take SUDS and adopt them if they are to the relevant standards that they think are appropriate. So most of the time, you're correct, it is Suffolk County that would adopt them. I'm not sure what is happening with the adoption of them in this particular case, because that's all dealt with later on. But certainly county are happy with what's been provided so far. And that's a separate discharge of condition has come in for that, for phase 2, and they're happy. So someone is going to adopt them, whether it's Anglian Water or whether it's county. I'm not sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one other point on that. SUDS were supposed to be natural drainage type systems rather than feeding into something like the sewage system. So why on earth Anglian Water would be concerned about that? The problem of excess water going into their system was one of their own making when they decided that they wanted all drainage water from new builds to go into their system so that they could charge people extra water rates on it, but that's another story. Looking at on one of your slides, it was talking about putting in trees to create a nice open space and all the rest of it. What sort of trees are they going to be putting in? Are they putting in standards or are they putting in whips? Because we all know that a whip takes something like 30 or 40 years to come to anything fruition. If you're talking about oak, it's probably 100 years before it comes to anything remotely reasonable. So what sort of trees are they going to be putting in to create this impression that they've shown with all their graphics and all the rest of it?
You are right, they are graphics, and they're probably showing them in a few years' time of what the trees are going to be looking like. My understanding is that they will be putting in not whips, but more mature plants. But that has all been agreed with the landscape officer. So she's looked at the detail of that. She's happy with that. It's just some of the other details that she's not quite so happy with. So surfacing materials and also some of the planting in the courtyard parking bays. She wanted that to be a more green and nicer place to be.
Thanks, Chairman. Well, yes, I know that a few is normally 3 or 4. I think the difference between a small whip-type tree put in and what it would look like in 3 years' time is probably a considerable difference from what they showed in their graphics. So I think we could almost take those graphics as being pure fiction and forget about them altogether. The other concern that I had was on this business of tandem parking, triple tandem parking. County highways are not very happy about it. I understand from what Councillor Beer was saying that they're prepared to make an exception in this case. How wide are the roads on this estate? Because I know that a lot of modern estates, the roads are the bare minimum width, and if you end up with excessive cars parked on there, then emergency vehicle access, refuse cart access, etc., is severely restricted. Also, where we have courtyard parking for certain of the properties, we know that people don't like using them because they don't like the fact that their car is out of their sight at night and can be broken into quite easily. And car crime is one of the increasing crimes in Suffolk. So are we looking at the parking provision in a more constructive and responsible way, or are we just sort of saying, well, this will do, we'll let them get on with it?
So, yeah, parking is one of those planning rubs, isn't it? What is the best type of parking? So visually, having those houses that are open-fronted onto the public spaces where there aren't any vehicles is much more attractive and safer probably for children that are playing in those areas. So actually, the parking courtyards can be a really, really good idea. I think the difference with this one is that electric vehicle charging points are provided in all of those spaces. So as we move across to electric vehicles more and more, you will see that people will be parking in their designated bays rather than leaving their vehicles on roads as they currently can, because they will need to charge them before using them. In terms of the on-road parking, there is quite a lot of visitor parking that's been provided, and they are lay-by style, so they're actually off the road. So hopefully that will encourage people to use those parking bays rather than just leaving their vehicles where they may be damaged or hit. That's all I can say, really. It's a matter of common sense for the residents, really.
Thank you. Councillor McLaren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sam, thank you as always for a very comprehensive presentation. I'm a bit concerned about the comments that were made by Suffolk County Council about the public footpath and the attenuation basin at the southern end of that, which is on page 21 and of the report. And I was concerned about items 3 and 4. Presume this attenuation basin, is this going to be liable to flooding as well?
My understanding is that the swales will be dry unless there is heavy rain. For example, how we've had it recently, where we've had a lot of rainfall just within a few hours. Normally that drains away quite quickly. So it's just a means of holding the water so that it can drain. Around those areas that are deeper attenuation basins, there will be fencing around them to help to safeguard public safety.
I think every time we get an application, and it always concerns me because familiarity breeds contempt. And if you're passing a sort of a dip that's normally dry, and we did a site inspection the other week, and the thing was fairly full. Now, that really is a hazard to small children and anybody else that might, fall in. And I just wondered if we can enforce what is the protection that goes round them. I just think, I did see the fencing the other week, and it was inadequate. I mean, anybody could have climbed through the fencing. What do we as a planning authority, can we enforce? The other thing they said was, I don't know whether you want, I think it was slide 9 or slide 47, where we could see where the one that's raised by Suffolk County Council, how adjacent to the footpath that is. Is it very close to? Perhaps it's a better one than this one here. We've got the footpath, and then
It might be easier to see them on the later slides, actually. Sorry, lots of clicking. We're nearly there. So, was it this one that you were concerned about?
no, it's the southern end of the footpath. That's what I presume the footpath is to the left, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's a comment by Suffolk County Council.
Yeah, so I
Public
think
rights of way.
it's this area here. So the footpath runs along here.
Right, okay.
So this is actually quite a shallow swale, and it's quite wide, so it will just be quite a naturally flowing dip. This one probably is the one that they're more concerned about, and this has actually got a knee rail around it.
Okay.
So you wouldn't accidentally be able to slip in there if it happened to be a bit slippy on the path or, a bit wet on the grass.
So we can't enforce anything more than that.
The trouble is, and this is another difficulty, isn't it? In the past, we have insisted on higher fencing around those areas, but if a child wants to get in there, a fence is actually quite a fun thing to climb over and a bit of a challenge, and excellent for hiding. So it's trying to get that balance right. The swales and the attenuation basins are designed much more thoughtfully these days, and you don't have those really steep sides that you used to see around many of the attenuation basins. These are much more, sort of flowing, because really they want to be used as play areas. It all forms part of the open space areas, and certainly Suffolk County Council Floods team have not raised any objection to what has been designed here. So I think it's that rights of way are just pointing out that there might be a risk, but I think the risk is quite low. And you do have that natural surveillance from these houses that face onto that area. I know not everyone's going to be looking out their windows all the time, but it does help with people coming and going, and hopefully it's going to be a well-used space where there'll be lots of people enjoying that open space, and we'll be keeping an eye on people. So yeah, it is a difficult one, but actually in landscape terms, knee rails are the best thing visually for that area.
Thank you. And the item 4 by the County Council was about the playground sort of causing an obstruction to the footpath.
Yeah, I wasn't too sure about that really. If I go to the slide where the play equipment is. So the play area is here, and the footpath runs by the side of it. I think there were concerns from county that, you know, the footpath would run right through the middle of that play area, but I don't, from that plan, it doesn't show me that at all.
Okay, thanks, Sam. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor McCraw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hi, Sam. I'm just looking at the pages 24 and 25 with the comments from Public Realm on the 1st of the 6th and the 10th of the 6th. And I wondered if the plans, since the application has been worked on over these months since, whether the applicant has taken on board the comments about biodiversity, the range of trees being planted. There is a tendency to use the national generic, although it could be described, I think, very often as the Taylor Wimpey generic, no offence intended, but you do tend to see the same planting schemes along a number of estates. So have those comments from that Public Realm been taken on board and included in the planting of different species and something that's perhaps a bit more natural to the Suffolk and the Babergh environment?
Yeah, so this is quite an interesting thing, and this is quite new as well. So Public Realm didn't used to really talk about the detail of planting, and this is certainly the first application where they have. And I know it's something that they're moving more into. We're much more conscious about biodiversity because of net gain that's required now. So all of our consultations have previously been with Essex Place Services, their landscape team. They've been involved all the way through the pre-apps, through all the consultations. So they're the comments that we've really sort of focused on. And they are quite fussy. And because we also use Essex Place for ecology, they talk to each other and they work together. So I would say I would probably be taking their comments above what is written here. But certainly in the future, maybe it's something to think about. If we're going to be getting quite detailed comments like this, then, you know, we should be looking at those as well.
I mean, I don't think there are any conflicts between the Essex and the Babergh Public Realm. I think it's just that there's mention of, I think, concern about beach, for example, which may be more subject to climate change scenarios. The reason I raise this, and I think it's important, is about the management of the public open space, the planting, as has been really mentioned, for the next 10 years. What arrangements, I mean, this whole Chiltern Woods development is going to involve a great number of these strips of open space and planting schemes, and it strikes me that the quantity in total is probably far too large for a single or even 2 or 3 parish councils to be able to handle. You know, it's not as though parish councils have teams of landscapers, gardeners. They can cut grass, that's about it, really. Public Realm aren't going to be taking on any of this space, and I assume that applies across the Chiltern Woods sites. What arrangements have the developers proposed for the long-term maintenance of all the public open space, not just in phase 2, but phase 1 and all the phases still to come? Because it strikes me as though we could well be left, or the parishes could well be left, with holding the baby, as it were, in 10 years' time when the initial arrangements have been completed. There needs to be some long-term thinking about this.
Yeah, and perhaps that's something that Taylor Wimpey can answer today, but certainly management plans are required. And that's all to do with the outline, so we would have to look to see what's actually been arranged through those discharge of conditions.
Councillor Barrett, you are.
Just to help my colleague, presumably when these are built out, the councils, both parish, district and county, will receive quite a large amount of council tax, which is part of what is provided in that council tax to provide the public realm the function that they would normally carry out. So there is a responsibility. You know, we do obviously receive quite a lot of income from these new properties, and so that income probably would be divided to help that public realm. It just really needs that it is sorted out at a stage of who's responsible. because there is income coming in. It's not as if there's no income.
I think that probably is fair, but as I say, I don't know the details of how that public open space is going to be handed over in the future. So, yeah.
It's not as if we don't actually make money out of it.
I only mention it because specifically the report states that the open spaces will not be transferred to the district council. So I wouldn't want to see the parishes having to hold all the responsibility. That was all.
Councillor McLaren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, on page 25, Sam, we've got a comment by the Waste Services. Are we going to, as that's been raised by them as a concern, the identifiable bin place sites, are we going to apply some requirement around that? It'd be terrible if your bin was not collected, wouldn't it? Because somebody couldn't see it.
I believe that Suffolk County Council Highways were happy with the bin presentation areas, so I don't think that's a problem.
Well, but they're asking that there's certain points could be more prominent. So I presume so that the waste collection vehicle can identify where the bins are. It says communal collection point for dwellings 288, 289 and 298 are hidden.
I don't really know what to say. Sorry. I think people will want their bins to be emptied, and they will make sure that they present them in a way that is acceptable, and that people can find them. I suppose it's seeing something on paper and actually driving round and seeing the bins is slightly different. So it is a concern for Waste Services, but it wasn't so for Suffolk County Council. So
I just think, I mean, it happened actually in my ward, and it's very annoying for the residents to have to keep ringing up and saying, my bin has not been collected. I mean, it's 3 properties. I know that's not a lot, but it could cause people a lot of inconvenience. Thank you.
Can I ask you to have a look at that, Sam? And there are no more questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Holt.
Who owns the school land, and will it come forward? Because Councillor Beer makes a very good point about parking, and it seems that we're making decisions today based on having a lack of evidence and information in front of us about the school, which could have a huge consequence on that spine road that goes through into the estate. So I think it's quite relevant that we know not necessarily the owner, but when that application's come forward, if it's going to come forward, how far have county got with it? Because we're making these decisions based on phases that eventually all blend together and interlink, and yet we're going blind about what's to its left, what's to its top, what's to its right, and we're making decisions, and all we'll end up with is blocks of phases that don't necessarily blend with the others. So I think the school is quite an important one here, in that how it affects that spine road, how the traffic's going to get to it. And my colleague to my left has actually made a very good point to myself that majority of people may well walk and cycle. But I think it's a very important thing that we should have an understanding of when we make decisions like this on these sort of phases.
okay, so firstly, today's application, you're literally just looking at phase 2, so just contained within that red site, nothing outside. To put your mind at rest, Suffolk County Council do own the primary school site. It will be coming forward because it's actually one of the conditions within the Section 106 agreement. I don't have that document with me at the moment, but I think it's once you get to a certain threshold in the number of dwellings that has to be delivered. So it will be coming forward, but we haven't reached that threshold point at the moment.
But you have no idea how it's going to blend in with that phase, the access point or anything, do you? could it be off Acton Lane, the access point? Could it be
No,
off the Spine Road, the access
no,
point?
the Acton Lane is going to be pedestrianised. So where Reynolds Way goes up to it, and you've got that crossroads at the moment, that will be bollarded off. So that then forms a cycle link through.
Bollarded off?
Yeah, so traffic will be taken around the main distributor road around Chiltern Woods, I believe.
Okay.
I might have that wrong, but that was my understanding.
Okay.
And then cycles and pedestrians will be using that piece of Acton Lane as a green area and sustainable travel link.
Later. In the meantime, we have the applicant, Mr. Samuel Caslin. You have 3 minutes to address the committee, and then if you'll stay seating after, because I think you might be getting some more questions.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, councillors. My name's Sam Caslin. I'm the planning manager at Taylor Wimpey. I have been working on the site since the start of 2020 when we acquired the site. It's during the site acquisition stage, actually. We inherited it off our East Anglia region, which I'm sure you're familiar with. I have no intention of taking up too much of your time this morning because the officer report and presentation excellently surmised the application. We have been doing our best to be good neighbours on sites at Chiltern Woods. It has been a challenging summer. It was very dry, so that we did have issues with dust. And we've had the environmental health officer down on site, and they were happy that we were doing everything we could to control that. And we also do get, despite our best efforts and very explicit instructions, the odd idiot driver coming in from wherever they choose. The site manager on site, Chris, has assured me that 99% of the time it's right, and it's just the odd instance. The good news is that we are making good progress on site, and we're on course to welcome our first occupants. We've got 20 people scheduled to move in December, so next month. The application before you has been developed in close consultation with council officers, Suffolk County Council Highways, the Drainage, Landscape and Ecology officers. The application includes 30% affordable homes and the associated housing, landscaping and play space. The proposals have been shared and discussed with the working group during their development and have been developed alongside the design code. They have been assessed in detail within the design and access statement against the design code criteria, so there's ticks where it accords with all those points. And the materials selected for the homes do accord with the design code, particularly the boundary treatments, which calls for darker bricks to be used on the outward-facing parcel boundaries. These homes will not have gas boilers. It's our intention to supply the heat and hot water to them through a centralised community heat hub, so a large air source heat pump effectively. That application was submitted near enough alongside this application that you're considering today, so hopefully that will get to a planning committee in the very near future for you. The application does present the next crucial step in the delivery of this strategically important site and unlocking the delivery of new homes at Chiltern Woods. Like every other business, we are operating in a really challenging environment, but we are absolutely committed to delivering this site and doing a good job of it. We therefore hope that you agree with your officer's recommendation and vote to approve this application this morning. Chair, if I've got spare time, I can pick up some of the questions now. I tried to make a little bit of notes. It's always the blasted parking, isn't it? But if I start with the school, we have been working and working with the Education Authority on the designs for the school. We have seen early designs, and I think it's always a balance for schools, isn't it, with school drop-off and parking. They don't want to provide too much because it encourages people to drive people to school when there's other sustainable methods like scooting or cycling or even walking. The early designs we've seen included drop-off facilities and a coach parking as well within the school boundary. I think they like having it within the actual curtilage of the school site. So that's the designs we've seen, and the access is off the Spine Road. So they're aware of that. Management companies, they're always fairly divisive as well for everyone. There's been a bit of discussion about parking or open space, etc. Where open space roads are private and they're not going to be adopted, they will be controlled by a management company. We do have an adoption plan for that. We will build it and complete it up to spec, and then it's handed over to the management company when they're happy with that, and they take responsibility for the maintenance and repair, etc. The residents, when they move into the homes, are aware that they have to make a contribution to the management company. It's just like paying your mortgage or your council tax or your Netflix subscription. You know, you got to, you do have to. They will be budgeting accordingly for that, and there are rules, I think, in terms of what the management company ongoing costs, how much it can increase by per year as per cost includes. So there will be a kitty to maintain those spaces.
If you'll hang on one moment, I think there might be a supplementary to that particular question. Councillor Bear, you wanted to...
Thank you. Yeah, just I've only got 2 points, and you've touched on both of them. But the road around the school, have you any plans or any procedure that you would put into place to stop parking along there? Because you may not be aware, but for the local parish council, which I think most likely that would be Chiltern, that would come under, it can take up to 2 years to get yellow lines put in to stop parking. And I accept that you're saying that they can park inside and there'll be drop-off points and all that. We have them now at lots of schools. They don't work. People will still turn up. The fact we're trying to get them to cycle, scooter and all the other things, we're not giving up our cars. So I do feel you have a responsibility to that, even though it may not be particularly this application that it needs to be sorted. But you need to be aware that you will be creating a problem. My second question, unless you want to answer that one first.
No, far away. I think I'll try and remember 2 points.
Good. The second one, why is it that you've chosen not to have all your roads adopted? Because my colleague in front of me, who brought up the point earlier about the adopted roads, any roads that are unadopted, this adds more pressure onto the people purchasing your homes. Now, I know we insist on charging points and panels and other things, and that puts the cost of dwellings up, because we as councillors are very aware that things that we ask for are provided and it's passed on to the person buying the house. But here, surely, to have a road that they've got to maintain, that is no cheap item. And further down the road, this does become a problem, as my colleague to the left of me said, that if one of them didn't want to agree in the little cul-de-sac, it causes big problems. Is this because you want to find a cheap way to provide more homes on the site, so you're compromising on making the roads not up to county standard? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll start with the first point and the point on the school and what we can do. It's a bit dangerous. It's not actually the application we're considering. With the Spine Road forms part of the main infrastructure works that's already been adopted. But regardless, it's still a really important point. And you do experience it. You see someone who's obviously needs are more important than anyone else's, and they park wherever they like. The main Spine Road will be an adoptable road, so it won't be for us to provide any enforcement. But I think it will be a point, as and when the Education Authority are bringing forward their plans, that they might obviously be working with the Highways Authority to think, okay, what sort of restrictions and if there is any sort of enforcement that we need to put in place to prevent people blocking or parking on the Spine Road. So that will be an issue, I'm sure, that will be discussed as and when that's brought forward, and most definitely when you consider the application for the school when that comes forward. On roads and adopting roads, it probably won't. We'd actually love every road that we build to be adopted for the reasons that you outlined. It does provide a cost to us, and it's a cost that we have to pass on to the residents through the management company. It's a real balance, I think. there's talk with the Highways Authority about their reticence, because obviously if they adopt a highway, it's more for them to approve, etc. So they do have quite stringent rules and in terms of what they will and won't adopt. And for a lot of these sort of secondary streets, they don't really want to actually adopt them. So it's not a case of us trying to build things cheaply or do dodge a fee. We'd love to get these adopted, but it's more a case that you can't. The spec of the roads and the spec of the smaller, I'd say not secondary roads, are just to an extent that the highways won't adopt them.
I'll just come back very quickly on that last point. But up until very recently, any estates built, housing estates, basically had their roads adopted. This is a new concept. I know we've done it in Long Melford, but this is reasonably new. And I've heard from people who live in Long Melford on the new estate, they're horrified to find that they've got to find money for this road. Are you telling me, in all honesty, that if I came along to buy one of those houses there, in one of these smaller streets, you're going to say to me, you must remember, you will be responsible for paying for the road and most likely the lights?
It's not as...
I don't think you will.
Yeah, well, it all gets picked up. I mean, we're talking about a scheme here that's got 1,150 homes. So the bulk of those will be on adoptable highway and be accessed from that. So it's a shared communal cost that will be going through it. So it won't just be the 5 residents in front of the private drive that have to pay for it. It will come out of the large communal pot for that.
Councillor Owen.
Thank you. I was just picking up on what Public Realm said about the equipment, the play equipment, about wooden equipment. Easily caught fire and things like that. Is there any way of changing that so it's not wooden?
I mean, it's detailed within the application, so it might be that a further condition that we explore for other things. We have used wooden play space on other developments, and we use it here. There's a real balance, I think, in terms of where we're using it on this site. It's on a footpath. It's alongside what's intended to be a sort of a fairly close to nature walkway. And I think it's probably more appropriate to have those wooden features there than it would be, for example, with the lap, where you might have larger features and it might be in a bit more of a destination play area. It's a balance. I think once you start putting in sort of the metal play equipment with bright red or luminous painting on it, it starts to look probably a bit more unsightly and maybe not appropriate for that location.
And defibs. Is there any chance of putting some defibrillators in on this one?
I don't see why not. I'm probably a bit out of my comfort zone in terms of what the costs are and getting power, etc., to them. If they're battery charged or something. I know they're quite often in places where there's maybe a slightly higher footfall. I'd assume we'd have those in the neighbourhood centre, so just to the north of the site. And I think it would be something we can consider, if not part of this application, but maybe something where we go back and install those. So that'd be something we'd have to consider.
Councillor James.
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of things. Have any of the houses got PV panels? And if so, how many?
Off the top of my head, I don't know. There is an energy report that's been submitted with this application, so that does outline, that's why the need for the percentage of the PV. I don't know what that is off the top of my head, though. So there is some, it's not all.
But you're expecting to have some at least?
Yes.
And the other thing, given you've got a blank canvas, why on your cycleways are you sharing them with pedestrians? Why not separate them to avoid potential conflict in the future?
I think in terms of how you do that, obviously the footpath and the cycleways are of a sufficient width and spec to mean that they can be shared. I think you might have I suppose you could twin track them in terms of how they, put them side by side. I don't know what the benefits are of doing that, of separating them, whether it's an... obviously, if you do that, it might take up a bit more of your open space. Is it an issue where you've got sufficient space on a shared footpath cycleway that you have conflict? My experience is that when you've got enough width, it's fine. The footpaths and the pedestrians can use them.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Hinton, you were next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick one. I was looking through the report and couldn't see anything much on it. Where we're talking about unadopted roads and adopted roads, in the past, County Council have insisted on street lighting where there are adopted roads. There's been no mention anywhere in the report of street lighting and whether that would be provided. I know that the MPPF does say that where there isn't any street lighting at the moment, it doesn't have, you can say that you can't enforce street lighting, that it can be an optional. Are you proposing any street lighting in there?
Yeah, I think typically we have street lighting to be agreed via condition. So the details and what sort of, how the lighting columns, etc. look are done post-planning. So yes, there will be street lighting and bollards, etc. So people will be able to navigate their way through in the dark winter months.
Councillor McCraw.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Sam. I'm going to come back to the management plan because I'd just like to know when that's covering both landscaping, planting, maintenance and the unadopted roads. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes. And you just reminded me as well about the tree planting, and we've agonised, and I think we've had quite a bit of discussion with members of the working group as well about appropriate use and using local trees and local planting as well. So it's not just whatever we can import from Germany on the cheap. There's a lot of consideration, and our landscape architects have been working really hardly on that to ensure there's appropriate planting. Obviously, there's a balance to be struck as well. So it's about, we're going to be doing a lot of planting on this site. So it's about what we can secure and what we can get in the quantities that we need for this site as well.
Because at the moment, I know planting schemes are constantly changing because we know that the climate is going to get warmer, and even a couple of degrees can change the future of a particular species. What I'm asking, though, is how long is the management plan that is required, I think, in the outline permission, is that right?
Yes.
How long is that secured for? And how can it be secured for not only the first buyers, but future buyers? Can that be done by condition?
Yeah.
Are we going to run out of a management company in 10 years' time?
I think the land gets transferred to them, and then they're contractually obliged. I don't know what it is, whether it's some sort of lease or whatever. It's 999 years or whatever that they have to be responsible for looking after and maintaining that. So the management companies can change, and I think they have to come back to us and approve that change. But yes, they are tied in contractually to that.
Can I ask planning officers if that's been secured or can be secured by condition, or has it already been dealt with and in the past?
Are you talking about the management company that will be looking after the site after Taylor Wimpey have left, or something else?
I'm thinking about the long-term management future of that, and whether that is securable by condition.
I think that is something that is between the developer and whoever the new management company is going to be. And maybe Christine can confirm this, if that is a legal document or not. I'm not too sure.
I was just looking through our system to see when the Section 106 was done, because we'd normally put it in the Section 106 and the transfer arrangements and the details of the transfer document would be put in that, so all the covenants. I can't find it at the moment, but if you'll give me a bit of time, I can have a look and maybe come back to you on that.
But in essence, it is securable with the applicant for them to carry the responsibility of setting up the future of the management plan. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
But
so
they have to do that with whoever that is, but then their responsibility is the initial one.
Yes.
That's fine. Thank you.
Councillor, it was Councillor Osborne next, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had three questions, but Councillor Hinton has very gone into the lighting situation, which I just needed to clarify the fact that you have roads there that haven't been adopted, therefore would the lighting still be attended to on those areas? And I think that was answered by yourself on that one. Just something that's happened during the area of heat and dust, etc., on your site. We've, as councillors, we've had in our wards anyway, particular residents complaining about the problems with dust, and it still went on after the finish of that. These were on roadways which backed onto the back of your development, i.e. Reynolds Way and Aubrey Drive, and in particular the position with the health of particular residents that have had problems. Can I just ask you, can I get you to clarify, are you able to actually enforce stronger positions on this? Because you don't seem to have actually dealt with those from the complaints that we've received.
I've been made aware of the dust issue. I think you've raised it in the past as well. And I've chatted with Chris on site, and you met Chris. His phone, you can always contact Chris, and he'll talk you through if there's any problems. He's more than happy to help. But the dust, as you were, was exacerbated by a particularly dry summer. It probably didn't help that the particular phase of the infrastructure works, etc., that we were doing was right next to those residents as well this summer. But as I mentioned, the Environmental Health Officer did come and visit the site and check that we were doing everything that we were required to do under the Construction Estates Management Plan as well, and was content that we were doing it. It's just been a really unfortunate situation. I'm surprised, particularly coming into Ipswich this morning, that dust is still an issue given how wet it's been recently. But if it's still an ongoing issue, it's something that it's best raised with the site manager, Chris, on site. I can provide his contact details, and we can talk to him about that, and he can talk you through the measures he's taking. I'm not sure. I mean, I think we've got quite stringent dust suppression measures on site as it is, and wheel washing and spraying down, etc. I'm not sure. I think if the EHO wanted to see more things on site, they'd have asked for it in the summer. But I do appreciate that you know, construction can be a noisy and a dirty neighbour, and
no, I appreciate.
There's only so we can mitigate, but I think in certain scenarios it's going to be.
No, I appreciate you've had the environmental health people there looking at these things and coming back. However, even after that, there were still complaints from areas around where you were, and I would like to see that any of the residents with health problems, and they were quite heavy health problems that they had, would actually be dealt with by yourselves. I'm fully aware of your efforts to provide things within that construction area, but you know, it's not a wise move to have people complaining about the dust and the problems that they have health-wise and having to visit hospitals.
Just if I may, if you do have suggestions or things that you think we could be doing, then feel free to raise them, and we'll consider their implementation. But,
Sam, I understand what you're saying, but you know, from my point of view, if you're saying that you are really concentrating on getting these sorted out, I'm happy. But those people that are got complaints, could we sort of deal with it in a more timely position? The other factor, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to ask, on some of the outline plans that we saw, you had buffer zones around the areas that you were dealing with, you know, green buffer zones. Can you just clarify what you've actually got there now?
Sorry, I'm not sure.
You had hedgerows and stuff that you were going to build, you know, you were going to have a 10-metre barrier or whatever.
Yeah, in terms of some of the advanced planting that we've done.
Yeah, yeah.
I can't comment because I actually haven't been down on the site, but I know they've got a lot of the planting in, so I haven't been down there recently, but I can provide an update, maybe through Sam and get that dispersed through members so you can see what they've done. I mean, alternatively, we're always welcome to a site visit if members feel like they'd like to come and see the progression and what we're doing on site, and then I suppose you can see some of the measures we put into site safety and managing dirt, mess and noise, etc. as well. So that's something that we'd also be happy to facilitate.
Well, perhaps that's a good way out of it. And as I say, I've had the fortunate position of actually having a site visit early on when you were just doing the archaeology stuff on that, just off Acton Lane. So yeah, I appreciate that and thank you, Sam. But as I say, those issues are quite vivid. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor McLaren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Morning, Sam.
Morning.
Back to the bins.
Sorry?
Back to the waste bins.
Yes, yes.
Yes. You noted in the report what was the comment by the waste services. Have you taken note of that?
I think, obviously, we do look at this, and we look at this on all of our developments in terms of, you go through all these measures at the start of a site to make sure that everything looks nice and your street scenes are great. And you know that when people move in, they dump their wheelie bins out the front and it all goes to pot anyway. So I can't comment on those specific measures. I know that we did go back and review a lot of them, and I think it's just a point that, you know, it's a case-by-case basis, isn't it? People, if you miss your bin day, you know about it, don't you? Because you've got to live with all that waste on your doors for a week. So I think people will make the effort to drag their bins out and make them prominent and drag them back. So I don't know about those particular drag distances. I'd have to go and check those on the plans. But
I think what I would say it's not often we do get a comment by waste services. So I thought, but in fact, if you look at the end of the report, the Chief Planning Officer is reviewing that anyway.
Okay.
But as it's a public meeting, I did want to raise it again because as a resident, if I'd paid a lot of money for a house, I would like to think my bins were being emptied. I was paying council tax. I would like to think my bins are being emptied. And
I wonder if it's up to members if they want to do that. If they that could be something that they could seek to add in terms of a condition, just to be sure that the waste management strategy is correctly signed off and endorsed.
Well, at the end of the report, it actually says about the chief, doesn't it, Mark, the Chief Planning Officer looking at that. But I did want to raise it publicly. Okay. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McLaren. I'll go back to Sam to reference that one.
Sorry, I know it's annoying. I keep going through the slides. So those 3 plots that Waste Services have identified as being a bit of a problem are actually just here, right on the main distributor road. So right in front of the 3 houses in question, there's a little bit of a verge with a tree. So I don't think visually it's going to be a problem for the bin men to actually pick up that they're supposed to be picking bins up from that area, because they're right on the main distributor road. But
thank you, Sam.
Okay.
Are there any more questions for the applicant? Oh, another light's come on. I can see that you are. Mr. Councillor Busby, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, 242 dwellings, no bungalows. Seems a bit disappointing. Is there any reason why that is the case?
Not specifically. I think in terms of sort of M42, M43 access, we incorporate those units and those smaller units within the apartment blocks. I think I might have, this has been raised, I think, on our original application. We find there's a bit of a, I'm trying to find the right word. We get differing opinions on bungalows when people ask for them and when we've delivered them, and we've done it not on this site, but we've done it on other sites. And everyone says, oh, there's a massive demand for bungalows, people want bungalows. We build the bungalows and we always struggle to sell them. And when we do sell them, it's at a heavily discounted rate. So it does, the evidence that we've experienced is that there's not a great call for bungalows. And we do generally struggle to sell them. I'm not saying that we couldn't put any on in the future of the site, and it's, you know, if there is a need for bungalows and it's a proven need, then I'm sure we'd be happy to deliver some bungalows on the site. But we do find they're better delivered through the apartment blocks, and that's how we've done it. So there is a range and a mix of houses. It's just there's no bungalows on the site.
Well, just personally, I think for every 2.5 and 3 story dwelling that you put up, you should also put up a bungalow to counterbalance it. I just think all we're ending up doing is raising the height of all of our estates. And I hear what you say about bungalows, but there are people that want bungalows. Maybe you're not putting them in the right places, or maybe you are charging too much for them. You can't have it both ways.
Thank you. Councillor Beard, you wish to comment on bungalows?
Just on that point, and I'm glad my colleague has picked that up, because I hadn't realised, but we had started getting developers to put in a few bungalows, because despite what you've just said, bungalows are the most sought under properties in Great Cornard for a start, and I gather they're sought after in most other towns and villages. So to suggest that it's difficult to sell, I'm really surprised to hear that comment. Where they've been put on the estates, I gather most of the bungalows have sold first. There's some on a private part of the Chiltern Wood. It's nothing to do with the Chiltern Wood, but off the Chiltern Road, Waldenfield Road there, they got bungalows, and all of them went very, very quickly. In Newton Green we had some bungalows, and I think they had about 5 or 6 people for every bungalow that they sold. There was only about 6 or 8 along there. No, 6 I think. So I'm pleased to hear you say that you would consider them on future sites that you bring forward, because I would respectfully ask members to try and remember next time that we do want bungalows, because they should have been some supplied here. And I'm disappointed there isn't any. So anyway, next time I'll be a bit more alert to it. I hope my colleagues will be as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Councillor Beard. Any more questions? All right. Thank you very much. You happy, Sam? You happy with everything? Okay. We will move on. We have no objectives, nobody from the Town Council. But we do have a statement from Councillor Jan Osborne.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Chairman and members, my apologies for not being able to attend the meeting in person. I am pleased to see that the site will provide 30% of affordable housing. Although our policy is for 35%, the 30% exceeds the requirements of the Section 106 agreement. I support this application, but I do have some areas of concern which I hope the committee will look at before making their decision. I would have liked to have seen more bungalows, as there currently is a need for those people wishing to live independently and those with a disability. Where open green spaces are provided, could the committee please request that these are protected from cars, vans, etc., using them for parking? I share Great Waldingfield Parish Council and Acton Parish Council's comment regarding the use of red bricks, which is in conflict with the design code, page 19 of the report. Please also note SCC public right-of-way and access comments on page 21 and SCC highways comments on page 23. Regards, Councillor Jan Osborne. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Claire. Obviously, we can't ask the ward member any questions, but so let's move on. Would somebody like to open the debate? Councillor Barrett.
Yes, I'd like to open the debate. This is another good opportunity to get Chiltern Woods delivered. I see that this is probably one of the most debated applications we've had for a number of years. Everyone's very familiar with it. I'm not quite sure what was left to debate or argue about, bearing in mind that the design code has been adhered to, which we approved previously. So I would like to propose that we go with the officer recommendation for the plan in front of us. Could I have a seconder, please?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to say Taylor Wimpey have been excellent in their consultations. They've had one.
Mr. Chairman, on point of order, did the councillor second it or not? I didn't hear him say anything other than trying to congratulate people.
Councillor Beer, I think if you just wait, you'll hear that Councillor Osborne did offer to second. He is allowed to speak, as you should know. So thank you very much. But Councillor Osborne, would you like to finish?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I was just stating that the consultations that they've carried out with all the councils and the virtual meetings that they've carried out probably twice a month or even, well, depending upon how you were situated. So I congratulate them on that, and I have no problem in seconding this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. We have a motion on the table. Does anybody want some further debate? Councillor Hinton, I think you wish to make a comment.
Yes, I'm not going to propose or second. It's already been done. And fundamentally, all the potential difficulties have been highlighted and questioned from the officers and the applicant. One point that I would just like to mention, there's been quite a lot of discussion about bungalows and their source. They aren't very popular with developers, I know, because they take up so much land compared to their accommodation space. If you're talking about 100 square metres of accommodation space for a 3-bedroom, 5-occupancy property, then it's 100 square metres of land, whereas if it was a house, because it goes up, it takes up less space. But there is a requirement for homes that are livable in for longer periods of time than just 2 or 3 years and then moving on. And a lot of people a lot of smaller builders in particular, are finding that they can sell houses very, very quickly if they use homes for life, rather than just building a standard 2 up, 2 down type sort of, or 3 up, 2 down property. And homes for life are good because they can be bought by young families, and the young family or the parents of that young family can effectively stay there forever if they want to, because when they can't manage the stairs, there is accommodation for them downstairs. So they are the obvious sort of crossover, if you like, between bungalows and houses. And I would just endorse that concept to the developer if he's listening.
Thank you, Councillor Hinton. Councillor McCraw.
Yeah, I think quite a few people would have been prepared to second the proposal. Seemed to be a queue at one moment. On the subject of bungalows, I note that 4.6 on page 27 suggests that no units are proposed as bungalows. The applicant has indicated that they intend for bungalows to come forward in future, the lower density phases. And can I just suggest that officers and any future planning committee that considers those lower phases reminds them of that when the actual applications are being developed. If there is an intention for bungalows in the lower density phases, please, let's see them. Okay, otherwise I'm inclined to support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Jameson.
Thank you. I can understand, with regards to the motion, happy to support the motion, but I can understand why we put in all affordable properties inside the apartments. But if they were houses, we wouldn't let so many apartments be so close together, or so many houses so close together, all for fear of stigmatisation. And I just wonder if having all the flats as social housing and affordable houses, if that also puts a risk of stigmatising the people that live there, and perhaps we could look at that in the future developments. But that's all I want to say.
How would we take that on board? I'm looking for advice.
We do take our advice from the strategic housing team, and you're quite right. Normally, we like to see affordable units in groups of 6 to 8 in one location, and that's mainly because the housing associations like them to be grouped that way, and they won't take them on unless they are grouped that way. I'm not too sure whether these flats are actually being taken up by Babergh District Council. Yeah, it might be a bit of a tricky one. Perhaps they need that type of housing in Sudbury, but I'm not really privy to that sort of information at the moment. Certainly strategic housing didn't raise any issues about groups of the 12 apartments being in one block like that. I think in future phases we probably will be advising that we'd like to see less one-bedroom units and see more of a mixture, because clearly there's families that need to be housed as well. But I will leave that to my colleagues in strategic housing to advise on that point.
Thank you, Sam. Any more comments? No, therefore...
Chair, can I just check that we mopped up on suggested conditions?
Just about to come to
yeah,
that.
sure.
There's no more suggestions for anything. We'll move to a vote, and prior to that vote, I'll just check with the area planning manager what he thinks we're voting on.
There were some things that were said earlier in the debate that might have got buried by the passage of time, so I just want to go back on them. We suggest additional condition for materials to start with, which I think that we haven't put on the report. Just materials, yeah, we'll sort that out later, the wording of that, but it's a standard materials condition. The second one was we had a bit of a debate about maintenance clauses in the 106, etc. I don't know if Christine's had a chance to uncover those. If she hasn't, then I've got a suggestion how we get around that.
I haven't been able to find
No,
the 106,
fine, right.
so I've checked, and there are either commuted sums and management company provisions within the 106. There's a community woodland, I think, where the management is only for 10 years initially for the management company, but the play spaces and other areas are for the lifetime of those areas, and the initial arrangement is for the owner to come up with the management company and for the council to approve it, to have sight of it, which I think is the real issue.
So that I would suggest is covered off as an issue. We don't have to introduce a new condition if members agree with that. And the third point was defibrillators were mentioned. Do you want a defibrillator condition?
Defibrillator.
Yeah, 244 hours is quite a big chunk of hours.
Yeah.
Well, I think either that or we wait until there's one next to the school, or the community centre. I thought it's going to be close to the school, isn't it? There needs to be one there.
They tend to be better once the thing's developed, and then you get action where people are congregating and where there's a requirement for it. And there's in Sudbury, as you're probably aware, there's a very good scheme going on to put defibrillators in, and they seem to be able to find them and put them in where they're relevant, rather than us putting, I mean, as a planning condition, I think it's a bit over the top.
In that case, Chair, the only extra condition is one relating to materials.
Okay. Thank you. You're all happy with that? Is the proposer and the second? Thank you.
Can we put a condition in for future applications, bearing in mind that they kind of promised us bungalows and lower density in the
Not
next
now.
phase?
No.
I think, Councillor Busby, you can instruct your officers to have such conversations about subsequent applications. You can do that here.
Councillor McLaren, you had a...
Mark, on the page 47, it just mentioned about the refuse bins. On page 47 of the papers, it said that the Chief Planning Officer be delegated to approve these reserved matters and other conditions, and one of the conditions is about the refuse bins. If you look at page 47. I know it's 3 properties, but it's important.
One moment before you waste your time. I think Sam can fill us in what...
Yeah, so just to clarify, it was actually Suffolk County Council Highways that asked for the condition for the refuse bins, just to make sure that the points where people are presenting them are as the plans, the approved documents. So including those 3 that the waste worried about. So.
Thank you.
Okay. We're now going to move to the vote. I'm going to ask Claire to put us on to...
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is now in progress. Councillor Beer, can I take your vote, please?
For the application.
Thank you. Councillor McCraw? For. Thank you. Councillor Busby, would you like me to take your vote verbally? Oh, thank you. Thank you, members. Chair, that's 11 votes for, that's unanimous.
That's passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you, the officers and the area manager. I suggest we have a 10-minute break, comfort break, and we'll get back here just after 11:30 to deal with the next application. Time. We'll make a start on the next one. Thank you all. It's DC 2105-110, land to the south of Thompson and Morgan, Poplar Lane, Sproughton. I'll ask the case up, Sproughton. Somebody will correct me. Yeah. And I'm one of the few who's born and bred Suffolk. Fine. I will now invite the case officer, Elizabeth Flood, to introduce the application to members. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is a hybrid application. The outline element is for a site to be known as Interchange 55, which would comprise industrial, warehousing, office, research and light industry. And then there's full application for the access. Okay, so this way. So this is the site. You'll remember you went on a site visit a couple of months ago. This is the A14 along here, Thompson and Morgan here, Poplar Lane here. You can just see Wolsey Grange 1 being developed out here. Tesco is down here, Park and Ride, interchange retail units here, and that is the Scrivener Drive A12, A14 roundabout, and that's the A12-14 going along here. Again, this is the site location plan, so what's shown in blue is the outline element, and what's shown in red is the full, so you can just see the full access that will be via the Park and Ride site, so you can see it sort of coming here. You'll notice these are the houses on London Road. You'll see some photographs of those. There's sort of approximately 7 dwellings in that location, and there's Thompson and Morgan at the top. Again, constraints, there aren't really any constraints. The only one is the Grade 2 listed building here on Poplar Lane, but you need to be aware that there will be housing here as part of Wolsey Grange and then employment. So actually, this building has already, or will already have its setting changed by approved development. You can also see the built-up area boundary. Technically, this is outside the built-up area boundary, but it is allocated for development within the core strategy. Okay, existing layout. You can see that the land slopes north to south. And also the other thing to be aware of on this are the electricity pylons, which are a sort of constraint for where development can go. Again, you can see the access here into the via the Park and Ride site, and the A14 along here. Again, this is the access plan. Sorry, it's not brilliantly clear, but what you should be able to see, it's a bit like faint, but this is where the existing roundabout is. So at the moment, there's the main roundabout here that leads to sort of Tesco, and then there's a mini roundabout here that leads to the Park and Ride, and then to the retail units here, Currys and so on. Now, what's proposed is that this will become a priority junction. So the main route will go along up here, and then there will be a sort of junction off to the retail units, and a further junction off just one way for the Park and Ride. And then the Park and Ride will do as it does now, go round, and there will be another junction here to come away, to come back. So this will be one way for this will be 2 ways, but there will be a one-way system within the Park and Ride as normal. And the parking spaces you can see that are pale pink, they're the ones to be removed. And you can probably just see up here some new parking here. So some of them will be replaced and some of them will be lost. The other thing to see on this plan is there is proposed a pedestrian and cycle access to the site. So at the moment, this is the existing pedestrian and cycle path along London Road, and there is a proposal for it to cross over, come along here, because it's a slope, it has to go sort of quite long so that it's not too steep, and then join here, and then it can get into the site. Again, this shows potential, well, works to the A12-14 roundabout. Now these are being approved for the Wolsey Grange application. So these need to be undertaken by the 300th dwelling on Wolsey Grange 1. But if they haven't happened, by the time 25% of this development has been occupied, it's proposed that these works will be done as part of this application. So you can see there's minor changes, signals here, and then some alterations to the lanes. So the lanes just to increase some capacity. So this may well happen prior to this application being brought forward or being developed. But if Wolsey Grange slows down for any reason, and it hasn't, it would become part of this application. This is the proposed layout. So this is just an indicative layout. So you can see the likelihood is it will be sort of large warehouses. This is what's shown on here. There would be a height limit of 12.5 metres. You can see the electricity pylons, which are likely to be retained, and therefore there won't be any development under them. And you can see here, this is the landscape buffer, 15-metre landscape buffer for these dwellings here to protect their amenity. And you can see the access into the site here. So that's via the park and ride, as you've just seen, comes through here and into the site. The other thing to be aware of is that potentially, it shows a potential link into the Thompson and Morgan site, so that HGVs would be able to access Thompson and Morgan without having to go along Poplar Lane, which is here, which is getting sort of more and more residential. So potentially that would be a good advantage to be able to access this site for the HGVs, not via Poplar Lane. But that's only a potential. Again, this shows it with the landscaping. So there is some existing landscaping along the A14, but there's proposals for a bit more. And then a little bit, and then some existing landscape and some more landscaping along the London Road and around the dwellings. And you can also see the attenuation basins here. So this would be undeveloped for the SUDs. Okay, so as set out in your report, there has been some archaeology found on the site. So this is Trench 1 here. This is the site where they found the human remains. So this is sort of the area where they think the church was, the site of the former church. So if I just go back, it's sort of this area that is of high importance. And we have been shown, again, this is indicative, but a revised plan to show how it could be set out to retain this area as sort of surfacing and parking, so that it would not need to be built on if that's a decision made in terms of archaeology. At the moment, they could choose whether to leave it in situ or try and remove the archaeology. And these are the site photos. So this is from London Road. These are the houses on London Road, and the site is just beyond there. Again, this is where we parked for the site visit, so you can see the site beyond and the houses in the foreground. Again, another one with the site here. Again, this is looking down. This is the footbridge, well, the bridge over to the park and ride site. So you can see this is the existing footpath and cycle path from London Road, and it would cross over just here or behind underneath the bridge, and then the new pedestrian path would go up here. So this is looking into the park and ride. So this access at the moment, which is sort of the one way out, this would become two ways and lead to the new development, and this would become a sort of junction off it for the buses and the cars to the park and ride, and then again they would swing round and then join this two-way road again. So this would be the access, and some of this landscaping would be lost because this would need to be widened and changed in alignment. Again, this is the roundabout, so these are the retail units. So this would be removed. There would be a two-way road, and a junction off this way to the retail units. Yeah, so these are within the site. See the A14 along here. This is looking back towards the retail units at Copdock and Tesco. Again, those are the houses. So currently they've got a view onto the site, but there would be landscaping along here. Again, this is the current Thompson and Morgan sort of overflow car park, and the development would sort of swing round there. Again, this is looking up towards Thompson and Morgan. You can just see their buildings, their low lying buildings at the top of the hill. You see how far it slopes. Again, looking back, this is Tesco and the retail units. And this is looking up again towards Thompson and Morgan here, in Poplar Lane. And this is looking across the site, to, sort of a long distance view. So Copdock Interchange is here. And that's photos. So, in conclusion, as set out in your report, the development is broadly in line with the development plan and is considered acceptable in relation to neighbour amenity. While there will be an impact on the highway network, it's not being considered severe as to justify the refusal of planning permission, and therefore the recommendation is as set out on your report to approve, subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Questions for the officer? Councillor Busby.
Yeah, we've got an employment site adjacent to the one that we're looking at today, the one that was part of the Wolsey Grange development, and they've spent a fair amount of money putting a new entrance in there. Wasn't that considered as a better entrance for this site rather than trying to take it through an extremely busy retail park?
We have to take applications as they come to us, and this is what the proposed access is. So they never proposed an access via the other site. I don't know whether that was to do with land ownership, but this is the access that we've been shown, and it's been considered acceptable by the Highway Authority.
Councillor Hinton.
Well, I was going to bring up, Mr. Chairman, the same point there with the junction. We're talking about something that hasn't happened at all on this industrial site yet, and let the traffic lights and the full scope of the junction alterations to access it have been put in place, and yet changes to lanes at the Scrivener Drive roundabout have not yet been implemented or don't have to be implemented yet. Does that show us what the Highways Authority are like? And also within the report it does mention that National Highways stated that development will contribute to queues along the western approach slip roads to the Copdock interchange. They have therefore requested a condition requiring a scheme of warning signs to state queues likely on road ahead. Where are they going to put those? About 200 yards from the junction, because that's what they usually do along the A12. All the junctions, all the signs warning of congestion ahead are beyond the last possible point where you can get off to avoid it. So in other words, you're in the queue, boys, this is why you're in the queue, not we could have told you beforehand why you weren't going to be there. So is there any suggestion as to where those signs should be?
No, it would be a condition to approve where those signs would go. So I can't say where they would go at some point before that junction or on that junction.
So we put that in the same sort of category as smart motorways, do we? We wait until the main occurs first.
Maybe the Highways officer can help you?
I cannot speak for National Highways because these would be on the trunk road network, but as it's subject to a planning condition, the location and the sign could be agreed with National Highways.
Thank you. Any more questions for Elizabeth? You got? Carry on. Now.
Okay, have you produced a model of potential traffic flows in the future, which take into account the 1,200 new homes at Wolsey Grange, the 150 houses at Belstead, the 600 houses at Hadley, Toys R Us Mother Care coming back, the Wolsey Grange employment site, and 1,500 houses at Great Blake? And have you put that all into a model for the Copdock interchange and the Tesco roundabout and Scrivener roundabout?
Yes, this was provided by the applicant in the transport assessment.
And we can be sure that all of those things were taken into account, were they? Not just the extra 500 vehicles, plus all of the Arctics and the vans that are going to go onto the site as well. I mean, we're probably talking about, what, upwards of maybe up to 2,000 vehicle movements to and from that site in a day. That's in addition to roads that are already clogged. So I can't see how it can't have an impact.
Your question?
Well, we considered that it would have a significant impact, but not a severe impact. Which in terms of numbers means the impact from this proposal is generally not greater than 5% of all the traffic that goes through the junction.
Which is fine if you're at 60% of what the junction can take, but if you're at 99% or 110%, an extra 5% is significant, as you said. Severe, and it could be significant. I mean, you've heard of the straw that broke the camel's back, haven't you? I mean, quite frankly, I want to see this model of these junctions, of the traffic flows through these two junctions, because I can't believe that anybody could come up with the fact that it can't make a significant impact on it. 2,000 extra vehicle movements per day, particularly at rush hour, through those junctions, they can't cope. They can't cope with what they've got at the moment.
I take it that was not really a question, and that you'll bring this all up in debate.
Well, the question was, am I be able to see the model that shows that all of the things have been taken into account?
Can anyone answer that? Elizabeth, there we go.
We don't have, there isn't a copy of the model on the slides, so no, I can't show you a model.
No? No more questions? Fine. We'll move on. I will now invite the Parish Council representative to speak, Mr. Peter Powell.
Am I on?
Yeah. You are.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Committee. Peter Powell, Sproughton Parish Council. 4 locally designated wildlife sites may be affected by this application. With 41% of UK species lost since 1970s, these sites are precious. Wildlife sites are complex ecosystems of interdependent microorganisms, plants and wildlife, including large mammals like deer. When links between wildlife sites and the wider countryside are severed, they become genetically isolated population islands, leading to interbreeding, depression, and a breakdown of that ecosystem. Havens Gateway highlighted such a link that runs past and through this application. This is incorporated in the Babergh's own 2012 Development Framework Report covering Ipswich Fringe development at pages 34 to 36. So we dispute the biodiversity gain quoted at 7.4 of your committee report, as it ignores biodiversity loss on this link. And we are surprised by the comments about deer on page 23, which are out of context and disregard completely the issues we have raised now and in our formal submission that have been ignored in this report. But this is an easy fix. A condition to ensure the boundaries of the site utilise hedgerows or fences with wildlife gaps to accommodate this wildlife movement will address this issue. We welcome the revised building height of 12.5 metres and the suggestion that there will be a 15-metre green buffer between the adjacent homes and the commercial buildings. So can a condition be included to ensure this buffer? We are concerned about the proposed noise limit of 5 dB above background for the development. A nighttime limit of 38 dB would be a significant nuisance and a potential health impact for residents. We would recommend the condition should be for no increase over background levels at residences at night, with a duty to measure and, if appropriate, retrospectively mitigate if that is not achieved. The decision to consider as a reserve matter the site's sustainable credentials falls short of current opinion on the need for renewable energy and energy efficiency. Measures such as solar panels, PV cells, battery storage, rainwater capture and grey water recycling were of little significance when CS7 gained approval, but these are now part of our neighbourhood plan, which was submitted to Babergh on the 4th of November. We would ask the committee to require that all reserve matters come back before the Planning Committee so that these matters are subjected to critical consideration. Traffic, this does concern us, but the issues are extensively covered by others. However, we do question the outcome if the Copdock interchange upgrade plan doesn't happen. We agree with the recommendations of the archaeological officer. If you're of a mind to approve this application, we would ask you to consider our suggestions to address the issues we have raised. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll remain there. We'll see whether there's any questions for you. Councillor McCraw.
Good morning. Thanks very much for coming. From your comments, it seems that the slight modification to the original comments made by the Parish Council's objections, that you're fundamentally, and I just want to check I've got this right, that you're fundamentally still objecting as long as you want conditions to be met. Is that correct? Am I reading what you're saying here? That you've got a list of conditions that you believe would make this acceptable. Is that a fair statement?
We are still concerned about it, particularly in relation to the traffic. I think, being realistic, we realise that this site is going to come forward as some form of application, and whether it is commercial or residential, it's going to come forward in some way or other. We just want to make sure if it comes forward that some important issues are addressed.
You mentioned in one of your comments about wildlife corridors, and I noticed the report contains some information about the relative undesirability of muntjac deer, an invasive species which I know to my cost do like crossing roads and running into things, and obviously you've got some significant traffic in the area. The muntjac could be more of a problem than can I say, a wildlife gain?
Chantry Vale, from my experience, has roe deer, Chinese water deer. Muntjacs are the most popular. Pretty much they've become very invasive across the country, so they are there, and I have seen fallow deer. Nearly all the deer in the UK, apart from red deer and roe deer, which we have, are invasive species. The other 4 are all invasive species, so they're a bit like squirrels. But they still are part of the ecosystems of all those 4 different wildlife areas. So you take them out of it, and for instance, muntjac deers eat a lot of brambles. They like eating brambles. They keep the brambles down. So when you've got a wildlife area, they actually contribute to it. And if you stop muntjac deer going through that wildlife corridor, which allows them to go down through and underneath the underpass under the A14, they will simply cross the A14. So stopping them going through that way is going to increase the number of deer collisions.
And just finally, if I could ask, yes, that's a fair point. And finally, if I could just ask, that there's a number of conditions that have been added to the recommendation. I believe, I'm not certain, but I think most of those cover points you raised in your presentation, that they can be addressed, or they can be used to address the concerns you've raised here?
Yes, for instance, I think the height is going to be a condition, but the buffer isn't. So we'd like to see the buffer added to it so that we make sure that that buffer.
So that would be the principal omission from the conditions listed in the recommendation.
I think I can't remember what on the recommendations.
I'm sure officers will pick up on that if they can.
I think the noise, we're concerned about the noise because I think the recommendation under the noise assessment was 5 dB above. And I think the environmental officers commented that if you put 5D above and then you have creep, which is where you have a lot of people 5D above, it becomes great. And 38 dB is very close to 40 dB of nighttime noise, which is where you start to have problems with, you can actually start to create health problems. So it seems to me that 38 dB at those residences could be a health problem, or getting close to a health problem. So we felt that there should, like I think was in the case of Sproughton Enterprise Park, the recommendation was that the noise level shouldn't be above the present noise level.
Thanks very much. Perhaps I can ask the applicant on that question later.
Okay, thank you. Have you any response to Elizabeth to comments there?
Yeah, I don't think there would be any issue with adding a landscaping condition that a minimum of a 15-metre landscape buffer around the dwellings on London Road could be included as a condition. I don't think that would be a problem.
I don't think that would be a problem. Okay.
What's the other thing?
Thank you, Mr. Powell. Okay, okay. If you could talk to the officer. Okay. Okay, thank you. Any more questions? No? Then thank you very much. We have no objector, but we do have the agent for us, and we have 3 members of the agent's team. Would you like to introduce yourselves as you start speaking, as you address the committee?
Chair and members of the committee, I'm Maureen Dowie. I'm the planning agent for this application. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. The principle of development of this site is established by its allocation in extant policy CS7 in the adopted core strategy. There's a demonstrable need for employment-related development. Interchange 55 will deliver in excess of 500 full-time jobs in an accessible and sustainable location. The site would be developed around the constraints of the overhead lines as a series of buildings or one single building to be determined through reserve matter applications. Final arrangements for addressing the site's archaeology would also be determined at that stage as agreed with the county archaeologist. We have agreed a reduction in height of the tallest buildings to a maximum of 12.5 metres, a landscape buffer and noise levels, all of which we agree can be controlled by planning condition. We respectfully request that permission is granted in accordance with your officer's recommendation.
Hello, my name is Aidan Fisher. I'm a Principal Transport Planner at Croak Consulting Engineers with 8 years' experience in the field of transport planning. I've been involved in this project since 2018 and have worked in close consultation with both SCC and National Highways as the highways authorities to provide all the information required in order for judgment to be passed in this application. Following this consultation period, both SCC and National Highways have concluded that the proposed development's impact on the highway would not be severe, and therefore, in accordance with the NPPF, the development would have an acceptable level of impact on the highway. It should also be noted that this site was assessed on the local network as part of the Water Grange 1 application for a more traffic-intensive office scheme, and the principle of development was accepted. There are no safety concerns with the proposed access strategy. The site is well located in regards to sustainable modes of transport with excellent footway, cycleway connectivity to the surrounding residential areas, as well as being situated next to the park and ride with close to Tesco bus stops. In conclusion, with the introduction of the conditions proposed, there are no highways issues that should prevent this development from being granted planning permission.
Good afternoon. My name's Paul Knowles from Building Partnerships. We're joint applicants and involved in delivery of this scheme. I think everybody is aware that there are a shortage of employment sites across the eastern region. Certainly a shortage in Babergh and for the area running from this site all the way across to Bury St Edmunds. And there's a specific demand from the Orwell Bridge to Bury St Edmunds that needs to be fulfilled through planning delivery. This site has not been marketed. We will start marketing it after planning permission is granted if that is what you decide today. But however, we still have occupiers have come forward for more land than we have available on this site. We've also had an occupier who was looking to tie up land in spring this year, had to go to another site adjacent to Ipswich in order to fulfil that requirement, and that was for about 4 acres.
Thank you very much. You've unfortunately run out of time. Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicants? Councillor Barrett.
Just following on from the last speaker, it does seem that there is a requirement for this type of employment land within the Babergh district, which is clearly demonstrated, I think, by your last comments that you were virtually almost pre-let, if that would be the case. Could you just expand that, please?
We have been approached through our agent Savills, and we have interest in the site for heads of terms virtually agreed on one occupier, awaiting authorisation from their head office to go ahead, and 2 other occupiers coming forward who want to engage with us once planning permission is in place. So, as with many commercial sites, the trigger on going forward for the commercial occupier is can they get planning and what's the timescale?
Just a follow-up. So are you anticipating that you will be back to us fairly soon with reserved matters on this site for the actual layout, bearing in mind that you seem to be able to, in a heads of terms position with potential tenants?
Our programme is tying up heads of terms with occupiers and legal contract to install access in 2023. You'll appreciate the access is through the park and ride, and you need to get the access before you get to the occupiers' land. And then occupiers' buildings and units constructed in 2024 and occupied in 2024. So the long stop date for completion of the whole of the site is 2025, but we expect to better that.
Councillor Hinton.
Inevitable that somebody has to ask the question. Why the access through the park and ride site and not via the existing access that's been put in place for the stage of Wolsey Grange?
2 reasons, really. Firstly, land ownership, which means that the 2 sites will come forward at different times, and therefore you have to rely on the other site to get access when we know that occupiers are there. The second is for the direct route onto the highway network is through the park and ride. We have had discussions with Suffolk Highways about that route and agreed it, but we've also agreed with Suffolk County Council as part of this scheme to provide them a site for a 30,000 square foot warehouse so that they could look at the possible relocation of some of their facilities in Ipswich to a storage unit on the edge of town, and therefore better use other facilities. So there are a couple of drivers as to why we access through the park and ride and direct to the Scriveners Lane roundabout.
So in actual fact, the Wolsey Grange access would be with 2 owners, yourselves and the owners of Wolsey Grange, access via the park and ride is with two owners, yourself and Suffolk County Council, but you've managed to persuade one of the owners that by supplying them with a dirty great big warehouse that they would let you through their land, whereas we don't know what's happening to the units on the Wolsey Grange site at the moment. It's not the most direct route through the park and ride site because it comes out to a little roundabout, then comes out to another roundabout, whereas the access from through Wolsey Grange comes to some traffic lights and then down to a roundabout and then away. Probably a much safer and more practical route. So why do you actually still persist with going through the park and ride?
As already described, the route for commercial traffic is more or less a straight route as opposed to going through two dog legs to get through the Wolsey Grange 1 site, and Suffolk County Council were happy to agree a route that allows for them to have other alternatives for their property portfolio that is accommodated by having a warehouse on site.
Councillor Busby, you had a question. Thank you. Councillor McCraw.
So, returning to some earlier matters, I don't know who wants to take this one. What contact have you as applicant had with the surrounding parish councils, and can you address the concerns that they've raised? Those already mentioned in the proposed rec conditions, and those perhaps not. I just wondered if you could comment on that point.
Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, we did have a meeting with Sproughton Parish Council before we submitted the planning application, so we were aware of some of the concerns that had been raised by the council, and took on board what we could in the application documentation. In terms of the planning conditions, we'd be happy with the addition of the conditions that were suggested by the parish council in respect of the landscape buffer. I think we just need to look, or we haven't got our noise consultant with us today, we just need to look in detail at the noise, the proposed noise condition. But the environmental health officer didn't raise any objection and has specified a condition in their response.
Yeah, the noise level was something I was coming to. So, but it is referred to in the recommendations, and I'm just wanting to know if it's going to be possible for planning officers to be able to take on the parish council objections with the applicant and see if those can be included in the conditions. This is still, to me, it seems there's parts of this application that are still a little bit unformed, and there's still some way to go. If that's a fair point, I think.
Yes, I would say that I've pulled out obviously all of the conditions that have come through from the consultees. We will be having a discussion with the case officer about those. There's certainly a lot of conditions in there that are pre-commencement conditions that we would be seeking to remove as many of those as possible, because what we want to do with it being a hybrid application is to be able to get on site as quickly as possible to build the access without being frustrated by pre-commencement conditions. But we will be having a very detailed look at the conditions just as soon as we're able after committee.
And that would seem to be the big one, the access, the roundabout. Whoever does the roundabout, whether it's associated with the Wolsey Grange application or if it defaults to being associated with this application, is there any security in the arrangements to make sure that that is in place? Well, it's going to have to be in place, frankly, for any work to be done, I'd have thought.
Let's go back to the planning.
Sorry, what we're suggesting is that if it hasn't been built by the Wolsey Grange application, which would be for the 300th dwelling, then after 25% of the developable area has been occupied, for this application, the works would have to be done. We can't request it before they start because that would be unfair. So it has to, we have to allow some development before we ask them to do the works.
So it's 25% of this application, not Wolsey Grange.
No, so it would be either the 300 houses come first, in which case Wolsey Grange will build it, or if that stalls for whatever reason, and then this development, goes really quickly, and they get to their 25%, they would need to come in to do the Scrivener Drive proposals.
I might be being a bit stupid, probably, but when do Wolsey Grange have to supply?
When they've built their 300th dwelling.
So at completion of 300 dwellings?
Yes.
And how far on are they now?
We don't know, but I can't say,
That
and I don't know.
seems to me a limiting factor. We might have to default to this application to provide the roundabout, which looks like it's going to be essential.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Councillor McLaren, you were looking? No? Or am I? No. Councillor Brown. Councillor Beer, sorry, yes. I get there eventually.
Councillor McCarran, sorry. I think my question was asked. I wanted to know what state Wolsey Grange had got to, but you've said you don't know, but you think it's around about the 200th. But it'd be useful if we did know, because we could then surmise, well, perhaps in another 7-8 months, they might be at the 300th, and we'd know sooner. But I accept if the officer hasn't got that information, but that would have been helpful.
Councillor Hinton.
Just a further question. I'm not sure whether it's for the officer or for the applicant, really, and that is upon what evidence has been submitted concerning employment need, because Ipswich Borough Council, in their comments within the report, have raised considerable concerns over the amount of available land that is already in the Ipswich area and the surrounding area, and yet the applicant has stated that there is a need for employment land, whereas there's 20-odd acres already existing with permissions at various places around Ipswich, not counting up the A14 corridor.
Do you have any comment?
Just a quick comment. So we presented evidence to the Greater Norwich Local Plan examination in respect of the demand on the A14 corridor, and we worked with Savills to prepare a paper on that. That paper was submitted as an appendix to our planning statement for this application, which was basically showing that the demand for shed space along the A14 was growing exponentially, and that the other employment areas in the locality would basically have run out of consented capacity within 36 months. And that report was done in 2021. So we're coming quite close to those 36 months.
I think Maureen said Norwich when she meant Ipswich.
Oh, did I? Apologies.
But yes, there's between the Oral Bridge and Bury St Edmunds, there's local plan allocation of about 3 million square feet. There's perceived demand to probably another 1.5 million square feet above that. The market has changed substantially because in East Anglia, until about 2 years ago, there was never a 1 million square foot building. Closest one was Peterborough. We've now seen close to that at Bury St Edmunds. And recently you'll be aware of detailed consent for the range for 1.2 million square feet at Gateway 14. So there is huge demand in this area, and there isn't sufficient allocations currently in the local plans.
Thank you. Any more questions? Thank you very much. Moving on, we have statements from the 2 ward members. Going in alphabetical order, Councillor Hardacre. Claire, you have.
Thank you, Chair. I will not be able to attend the meeting in person, but offer the comments below. I object to this application as it currently stands. My primary concern with this development is access. I live very close by, and so I'm very familiar with the roads, pavements, roundabouts and junctions of this area because I regularly shop at Tesco and occasionally walk to B&M or Pizza Hut. I do not believe that the retail park is a suitable way of accessing the site, and while I note that highways have also raised the issue of walking, cycling access, I'd like to point out that the footpath at the park and ride end is very narrow and overgrown, and that cycle access to the retail park in general is essentially zero. I'd much rather see some cooperation between landowners and have this site connected to the main road network via the new traffic light controlled junction just up the A1214 behind Aldi. The spur from it arcs round and points directly at the proposed site for this development, ending less than 200 metres away. The alternative layout of the proposed plan submitted by the applicant would not need to change to accommodate this either, as the proposed road between units 2 and 3 would link nicely with this access road too. The original proposed access road could then be much smaller in scope and become a cycle pedestrian link to the park and ride and retail park, and the newly proposed walking cycling link to the A1214 would not be required, preserving the greenery there. That's Councillor Rick Hardacre.
Thank you.
And we also have a statement from Councillor Zach Norman. I unfortunately can't attend the meeting, but I would like to make the following representation regarding wildlife corridors and also green energy. It is essential that all developments along this corridor must take care and preserve the existing wildlife corridors, as in reality, being able to create new wildlife corridors are not going to be as efficient, established or as environmentally friendly as the wildlife corridor already in place. I would like to see in the planning conditions of this application something that enhances the wildlife corridors so that we don't see these eroded. In addition, I would also like to see a condition on this application surrounding solar panels. We have applications all across Babergh where it is proposed that fields be ripped in half to put in huge numbers of solar panels, which in essence appear to be a green measure, but actually destroys the already natural environment there and is not a sustainable measure of reaching our environmental goals as a council. I would like to see that on the employment building, solar panels are incorporated on the roof so that power can be provided in this way, so that it is not destroying a field, but rather would enhance this scheme so that the scheme can be future-proofed and can provide something positive to the area and help us as a council achieve our goals of becoming net zero. I feel that both of these requests are reasonable, and any company who wants to take on a scheme of providing employment is inherently a good thing, as is something that is needed across this district, but these schemes could also benefit the district in other ways, and we as a council can see to be leading on this to set us ahead of other councils and provide excellent schemes that not only provide jobs but also benefits to the environment, so that the environmental loss of providing such schemes can at least show some positives. I hope that these points can be delivered to the Planning Committee and are taken into consideration when coming to a determination. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Claire. Right, we are now, after that, as we can't question them, moving into debate. Go on, Councillor Busby, you kick off.
Okay, I find this highway thing a bit suspicious. If we look at the highways comment in August of this year, they required a contribution towards sustainable travel improvements on the 1214 London Road corridor to further encourage the use of sustainable modes of travel and mitigate the impact of the development on the local highway network. So they're not necessarily talking about improving a junction or the roundabout, they're talking about alternative means of transport. A contribution of 124,000 is required. Without this contribution, the proposal would not be in accordance with NPPF 111 due to a severe, your words, due to a severe cumulative impact upon the highway network. Okay, so 2 months later, they're persuaded that they don't need this development, this contribution, because the changes to the roundabout are going to happen as part of Wolsey Grange. No mentions about how they're going to cope with changing the habits of people to get off cars and into bikes and walking, which was where the contribution was for. Quote, it is noted that the proposal will be providing a significant investment in off-site highway improvements. I'm not certain I've seen any of those. That will also benefit users of the proposals and others. I'm just not convinced that this is the right solution for this particular site. I think we all want to see some employment on it. It's a good site for that, not a problem with that. But we have to take account of the issues that we've got. And it's going to be marginally better for the transport, for the traffic to come out of the Wolsey Grange new entrance than to come through a retail park. I know you haven't got access that way yet, but I think we've got to investigate that, and I would propose that we defer this until we've had the opportunity to talk to Taylor Wimpey about access through that particular field, and until we can see the traffic model that shows that the junctions can take the additional traffic. Because again, it says in here that it's severe. Where's the quote? That the junctions are at capacity. You can't increase capacity, whatever you do. Well, if they're already at capacity, and they're already, to some extent, over capacity, and whatever time of day you go along there, you can guarantee there's going to be queues. Between 7:30 and 9:30 in the morning, and 4 to 6:30 in the evening, you can hardly move. So if they're at capacity, where the hell's that extra traffic going to go? I would like to see the traffic model that shows that those junctions can cope with an extra, potentially 2,000 movements a day. So I've not got a problem with us using that site for employment. I think it's a good site for that. I'm just concerned that we don't make it more difficult for everybody else in the area, particularly in Pinewood, who can't get off Pinewood at the moment through Scrivener Drive, that we investigate all possible opportunities to find a different way out. So I'm suggesting that we defer until we've conducted those investigations.
For a referral? Okay. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Jameson.
Yeah, happy to second. I echo Councillor Busby's words. I use that junction quite often, and it is a nightmare at the moment. So what it'll be like with more traffic movements, I don't know. But yeah, I'm happy to second his proposal that we defer and look at alternative access methods.
Thank you. Does anyone like to debate this referral? Councillor Hinton, you wish to?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I'd support this deferral because there are so many holes in the potential traffic implications of this site. It makes you wonder just sort of what is going on. Everything's a little bit vague when it comes to signage by National Highways. We know that National Highways have a proposal in to upgrade the Copdock Mill interchange if there's some funding to be available, but it's not likely to be available until 2025 onwards, even if it is approved. And with the present climate, as far as finances of the country are concerned, I suspect that it won't get approval, which means it will be stuck again. And yet back in 2008, the parts of the A12 leading up to Copdock were operating at capacity, and we've had considerable building since that time. So there's far too many travel impacts in this area. I'm also a little bit concerned by the rather bland statement of archaeological conditions to cover what's going to happen to the site of the church and the graveyard. If they're going to remove skeletons from there, they are going to have to get a license from the Home Office to move them. And if they're not, they're just going to sort of tarmac over the top and treat it as part of a car park. Are we ending up with another Richard III type situation? So it's a site that perhaps needs a little bit more recognition and a little bit more sympathetic consideration than is being proposed at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Barron.
Mr. Chairman, I'm really concerned that when
applications are coming to the council and coming to committee to be decided on, that then when we've been actually questioning the Highways Authority and they have told us in no uncertain terms that they are happy with what we've got before us, that we do not take that at face value, and then we are deferring when this has already taken quite a long time to get to this position. I think this is unacceptable to, one, the applicant, and I think it doesn't show a very good light on the committee of not being able to make a decision based on the information that has clearly been laid before us. And what we're asking is saying, I don't believe the information before us. I want to see that information in the thing. But surely we have to take the information from our professional officers at face value. We can't be asking for this further information, delaying a process which has taken presumably a long while to get to this stage. I think it's unfair to the applicant, and it shows a lack of us judgment. I think we need to believe what we're told. Otherwise, where do we stop? Do we then look at everything in minute detail? I think it's very irresponsible for this committee to defer decisions that it is here to decide on.
Again.
Can I respond to that? If we didn't question things, then there'd be no point in anything coming to committee. Because if everything is decided by the officers and the words are perfect, the committee have no role.
I come back on that. I don't have a problem with questioning things, but there's questioning things, getting answers, and then not believing what you're being told. And that's basically where you are, I think, Councillor Busby.
Contradictory terms in the report from the officers.
Thank you. Councillor McCraw, you wish to make a comment?
Yeah, I mean, before debate descends, I just think that there's a couple of points I'd make. One is that, yes, I take the point about highways officers. A piece on the impact, except in one occasion it's less than 5%. I'd like to know if there's one occasion is less than 5% impact, not severe, how severe is it? Is it 10% or 15%? Because you've given a figure for one thing. You're saying all but one part is 5%. Second thing is, I think on the archaeological side, I've got a feeling that the proposal is in fact to preserve the site intact. It's not to actually excavate the bodies. That's pointed out in the report. And that's not uncommon. Basically, there are unknown numbers of graveyards across England and Wales that are going to be uncovered for centuries to come, and not all of them are going to be significant. But so what you often do is you preserve them actually literally under car parks. It's almost a preservation. It's a preservation technique sometimes used to keep sites intact, as long as you know that what you're doing and you're putting it on top. I don't think we have the right to defer. I think it's probably not the right thing to do, given that we are taking professional advice.
Thank you. Councillor Holt, you were...
Yeah, equally share that point that I don't think it's appropriate for us to be looking to defer this application. We've got all the professional advice in front of us. And yes, we can question it, which we have, and we've had answers. No doubt this is an extremely busy junction, and it will have increased traffic movements because of this. But the answers have been given. The arguments have been put forward by highways and all the other authorities who are responsible for it. And it seems rather inappropriate for us to go against that. The other thing that I would question is Councillor Busby's reason for a deferral was to instruct the applicant to go and talk to a different landowner to try and get his application through. Was that the wording of it? Because to me, if you're deferring it to get further details about traffic movements and asking for technical evidence and advice from highways in addition to what we've already been given and heard, then I could sort of have a little bit of sympathy with deferring. But if you're just telling the applicant to go and talk to someone else to try and make a better scheme that suits you, then I don't agree with that phrasing, and that's what it came across as.
Thank you. Councillor McCraw.
I don't know if the transport officer could answer the question I briefly referred to about what is the level which is above 5% and where is it? What percentage would that one be? It's just to inform the committee.
Well, I think it would just be a case of exceeding the 5%, which is the typical threshold that he would consider to be a
Are we saying a little over, a lot over?
Well, you know, if it was notably exceeding the 5%, so even if it was 6, we could object, I think. But it's worth noting that the Scrivener Road roundabout has capacity issues without this proposal. How is it? It's adding to the congestion issues, but it would still have exactly the same issues without this proposal.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. In this day and age of businesses and our budgets and things like that being changeable, I think any offer of providing employment is important, and it's important for Babergh District Council to encourage employment. This is going to provide, I think you said, 500 jobs. I think whatever happens on the A14 and off the A14, whichever junction you choose is going to have its limitations because it's already in place, traffic flows and everything. So it is going to, but I think it's important for our district to encourage as much business as possible. And so I shall be supporting the recommendation.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I thought you forgot me. But anyway, no. I agree with the 3 previous speakers that we shouldn't defer this. We have a duty to get this sorted. And we should bear in mind the fact that, you know, the government is going for growth. We do need growth. We do need employment, and that is important, and we shouldn't delay that. I think perhaps Councillor Busby does have some concern and points, but the highway officers, and we're always told they're the experts, and you, Councillor Busby, and I, and perhaps others know what we think of some of these experts, but there we are. So we've got to accept what they're saying. And I certainly will not support the deferment. Thank you.
Right, is there anything more to add to...
Well, I'm just suggesting, I mean, we haven't got a proposal in front of us for actually approving the application, which I'm prepared to do. So we need to go to the motion and then substantive. So we do need a proposal. So what I'm proposing is that we accept the application as it is before us, and I call for a second for that, because obviously we need to take the first vote first, and then obviously if that passes, then we don't need to do this second vote, do we? Sorry, I'm not trying to do your job, Chairman, but it just seems a logical step.
What we are going to take is we have the motion for deferment, and we have a proposer and a seconder. We will take that and vote on it. Then when we come back, you may, if you wish, propose acceptance. Let's do the vote first, and confirm, then we'll come back.
Thank you, members. That vote is now in progress. So this is a vote for deferral of the application. Councillor Beer, can I take your vote?
I'm against the deferral. Thank you.
Councillor McCraw? Against. Thank you. Thank you, members. So we have 4 votes for deferral and 7 votes against deferral. So that motion has failed.
Yes, you can.
Thank you. I propose that we accept the officer's recommendation for approval and we call for a seconder for that.
Councillor Holt, thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to second that. I think as an authority we should welcome this application for employment plan coming forward. I note the concerns about transport, but I certainly will second this proposal.
Thank you. We have a proposal and a second. Do anybody wish to comment? Councillor McCraw.
I'd be happy to support that, but I would like the inclusion of the wildlife corridor as suggested, if that's something that can be arranged between the applicant and the officers, and as the suggestion that came from Sproughton Parish Council and other parties. So I'd like that added if the proposer and seconder were happy. Yes, thank you. Also, I know that particular corridor quite well because the one proposed is to go into the old London Road and join up those 2 areas of land across the A14. Now, I use that route quite frequently on a bicycle, funnily enough. On the cycle path, on the underpass, because it's a very safe way to get into the north of Ipswich, down the cycle path down London Road, if anybody wants to know.
Thank you. Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I'm happy to support what Alistair McCraw has said and have that added, if it's possible, to the conditions of the wildlife corridor. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more comments before we go to a vote? No? Okay. Planning officer,
Can we just confirm officers have got that's been accepted by the proposer and seconder?
That was what I'm just asking.
The case officer just reminded me there was one about a landscaping buffer as well. 2 conditions, landscaping buffer and wildlife corridor.
Okay, another 2. You're happy? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this vote now for approval is in progress. Councillor Beer.
Approve the application.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor McCraw. In favour. Thank you. Thank you, members. So that is 7 votes for and 4 votes against. Therefore, that is carried.
That is carried.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next meeting will be on the 30th of November here in the council chamber. I now formally close the meeting with thanks to all of you who tried to help me as we went along. Thank you.